Welcome to KMET 1490 AM ABC News Radio and the Southern California Business Report with Yvette Walker, a show dedicated to highlighting successful Southern California businesses and the people behind them.
Welcome and thank you for joining the Southern California Business Report on ABC News and Talks, KMET 1490 AM, 98.1 FM, and KMET TV. I'm Yvette Walker, live blasting our signal from the center of Southern California, serving a population of over 25 million. Get us crystal clear and on demand by downloading the free live streaming app on Google Play or the Apple App Store. As always, a huge shout out to the team, Mitch, Bill, and Sean. I love you. And to our special advisory committee, Bill Morris, UCI School of Business, Jose and Camila Rubio. Thank you all so much. Today, I have the distinct privilege and honor to introduce Sheriff Dicus, San Bernardino County Sheriff, and Jesse Armend, top 250 Hispanic realtor and former council member of City of Fontana, California. Sheriff Dicus was raised in a law enforcement family and has lived in San Bernardino County for over 40 years. In high school, he was a Sheriff Scout, Explorer Scout. After graduating, he enlisted in the United States Army and was assigned to the 101st Airborne Division, where he served as a military police officer at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, and in Sinai, Egypt. After his tour of service in the military, Sheriff Dicus worked for the Department of Veterans Affairs Police Department in Loma Linda, California. He was hired by the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department in 1991 and attended the Frank Bland Training Center 106th Basic Academy session. Sheriff Dicus has a bachelor's degree in criminal justice from Cal State San Bernardino and a master's degree in communications from Cal Baptist University. As an undersheriff, he oversaw the day-to-day operations of the department, as well as the Internal Affairs Division, Civil Liabilities Division, and Bureau of Administration Division. One notable project was the jail utilization study, done in partnership with Cal Forward to determine the effects of prison realignment and recidivism in San Bernardino County jails. As an assistant sheriff, he was responsible for support operations and supervised 3 deputy chiefs, the public affairs lieutenant, and the legislative liaison who oversaw the Corrections Bureau, Court Security, Crime Lab, Coroner, Employee Resources, Sheriff's Academy, Public Affairs, and local law enforcement legislative efforts. As a captain, Sheriff Dicus supervised technical services, communications, records, and the Bureau of Administration. Sheriff Dicus has held a position at every rank in the department, and his past assignments include corrections and patrol in Barstow, Apple Valley, Victorville City, and Victor Valley stations. Mr. Jesse Armend was born and raised in San Bernardino County. A strong believer in hard work, Jesse got his first job pressure washing trucks for a local logistics company at 16 years old. He was eventually able to take advantage of an apprenticeship program to become a licensed mechanic. After graduating from the first class at A.B. Miller, he started his own small business in Fontana, California. Since then, he has earned national and regional recognition. He was named one of the top 250 Hispanic realtors in the United States by the National Association of Hispanic Realtors and is a board member for the Inland Valley Association of Realtors. After starting his family with his wife, Delene, Jesse decided to get involved with his community. He served as president and on the board of directors for the Fontana Rotary Club and is a community emergency response team member. He is also a member of the Fontana Chamber of Commerce and the Water of Life Church. Jesse also served as director for the Chaffey College Foundation, helping to raise money so disadvantaged youths could afford to earn their degree. There, Jesse and Delene Armendaris Endowment at Chaffey College is fully funded and has helped local students attend college. Wanting to get involved in local government, Jesse earned an appointment to the Fontana Planning Commission, where he helped shape the development of one of the largest and fastest growing cities in the Inland Empire. Thank you so much, Sheriff Dicus and Mr. Armendaris, for being with us here today.
Our pleasure, Yvette.
Beautiful. All right, so let's start with Sheriff Dicus. Thank you so much for being here today. You've been a regular guest of the program. Thank you so much. So I'm feeling like the guests kind of know a little bit about your background, but can you give us just a brief rundown of what motivated you to pursue a sheriff position in the county of San Bernardino?
Well, Yvette, you're seeing a lot of things change in our society right now. And at the street level, law enforcement has bared the brunt of, you can call it homeless issues, substance abuse issues, you name it. The expectations of law enforcement have been exponentially increased. So one of the biggest reasons I wanted to stay is you'll see a lot of people retiring and moving on to do different things. I want to support the men and women who are doing the grassroots efforts, work with our legislators, and try to make sure they understand what happens at a street level. I believe a lot of things that are happening right now are well-intended people, but have no idea of what the battlefield is in terms of the ground and how those things are affected, particularly in the law enforcement circles.
Right. Okay, perfect. Theory is one thing, but when it's actually put into practice, those two things can look very different. You're absolutely right. Mr. Armendariz, please share with us a little bit about your background in real estate and what motivated you to pursue, a career supporting your community through City Council and the Planning Commission in Fontana, California.
Well, I started my career about 22 years ago in real estate. Worked my way through, started my own business, started doing some entitlements, and did a little construction on my own, and just was able to get a better understanding of planning and development. Had my opportunity 8 to 10 years ago to be a commissioner for the city of Fontana and see how development really materialized, how it came to be, and seeing the pitfalls and then what can and can't be done. From there, I became a school board member, managed I believe at the time, $480 million budget, and was able to, do good work for my community from an educational school board member position. Then when I was asked to run for city council, and accepted that. And when I was able to work there, I was able to deal with some of the homeless issues, housing, infrastructure, things like that, which pretty much set me up for the endeavors that I have moved forward to these days. So that's pretty much my road. Enjoy everything I've been doing. At the end of the day, it comes back to serving people. I always tell people, what we need to do a little bit more of is serve people. Work with our community to make it a better community, because it's not going to do it by itself. Working with our public safety to make sure that we all do our part to make sure our communities are safe. And that's pretty much what I do.
Beautiful. I love that view and that perspective. It's very much needed in our communities today, right? To have members of the community engage and to find ways to serve, their fellow members in the community, especially if you're raising a family in any area, really. So let's jump into this because this program is part of a multi-series program aimed at looking at Measure EE, which members of the County of San Bernardino or residents of the County of San Bernardino will be seeing on the ballot. I believe everybody received their mail-in ballots. I know I received mine in the mail just a day or two ago, as well as my catalog that talks about all of the various measures and outlines what they mean in preparation for that voting process. So Sheriff Dicus, please share with our audience today what your analysis of Measure EE is and how you view this impacting your department moving forward.
Sure, Yvette. So our Board of Supervisors, when they implemented essentially this measure and wanted to bring it before the voters, the media seems to really surround the whole succession from the state piece. And what the importance is, or where we want to really put the exclamation mark, is what we're not getting as a county. If we're 35 or 36 in overall funding we're receiving from the state and federal government out of the 58 counties that exist in California, there's something missing there. We have residents numbering 2.2 million people. We're growing. We have a logistics center. I mean, we're an economic force. And to have the minimal amount of resources that we're actually getting just doesn't seem to be right. And what my focus is in this is to make sure that all of the citizens that will be voting on this measure understand what it looks like from a public safety perspective. So I can tell you trial court security hasn't been funded appropriately. And I can share the numbers as we go through our conversation today. When prison realignment occurred, and the word realignment gets used a lot in California. We can go back to 1991 mental health realignment, prison realignment. Now you're seeing the Department of State hospitals realign. That's really a fancy way of taking state responsibilities and now pushing them down to your counties and to your cities to build capacity that doesn't exist. You and I have had conversations about homelessness. We've had conversations about the mental health issues that are out there. And all of these things are directly correlated to this capacity building and things we aren't getting from the state other than their responsibilities that they traditionally took care of. And I want to kind of go into depth on some of those things. I know at the end of the day, it's my responsibility. In this county, we have what we call the county vision, and it's basically supporting a citizen in this county from cradle to career. My job is to make sure that as they pursue their dreams, they're not looking over their shoulder, worried about their safety while they do it.
Right, absolutely. And so, Mr. Armendariz, when we look at this public policy issue and this measure aimed at, pursuing a study to make sure that the county is receiving their fair share, a lot of what Sheriff Dicus just talked about in the realignment process sounds a lot more like unfunded liabilities to a local level. So based on your experience as a council member, can you please talk about and express, what your interpretation of Measure E is as we look forward?
Yeah, so for me, Measure E is in my viewpoint and what I've shared with people who've come to me and asked me, Jesse, what do you think of Measure E or EE? And I've said, it's an accountability measure. It's a transparency accountability measure is the easiest way for me to describe it to someone, saying, at the end of the day, what we're asking the people of San Bernardino County is to hear their voice. Do they want us to go and take those steps to show what's really happening, to do the studies, because the studies aren't cheap. To do the audits, they're not cheap. This stuff costs money, and it's going to cost a lot of money to do it. But when it's all said and done, we're going to be able to tell Sacramento, here's how much we are not getting. Here's where we feel our fair share is not being met. And to me, that speaks volumes. I've heard people tell me, through this conversation before, well, Mr. Armendariz, county can do it today. They can spend it. Yeah, they can. They've been fighting for over 20 years to try to get their fair share. What this is I believe is an opportunity to have an additional tool to be able to go back to Sacramento with this in hand to say, the people of San Bernardino County spoke. We listened. We did the homework. Here's what we need. And at the end of the day, that's what this is really about. Telling Sacramento, here's what we need. And, the successorship component of it is, what I would call the absolute. That's the, if you are not going to provide for us what we need, then we are going to exercise our rights accordingly. It's giving a warning, but it also giving them an understanding that we are going to fight for what's ours and we're not going to back down.
Well, that sounds like the appropriate, channel to take with, like you said, you go prepared with your tools, which that is going to be hopefully a measure that is passed. And you could take Sacramento and say, the people of San Bernardino County have spoken. They're looking for transparency and accountability. Sheriff Dicus, please talk a little bit about how you see this measure unfolding should it move forward in a positive direction and San Bernardino County is able to, take on that analysis and garner those additional funding opportunities or funding channels. How do you see that positively impacting your department and the ability to provide a robust public safety environment for our residents?
So I think it really transposes itself in a number of ways, Yvette. So talk about the Board of Supervisors first and foremost. They've been criticized by some state assembly members that, hey, you didn't come to us with these issues and you should have. The reality is this is an assembly issue. And it's our legislators that should be looking out for us in a number of these ways. I can tell you the State Sheriff's Association have brought a number of these things before all of them to try to get fixed. So I mentioned at the beginning trial court security funding. Our actual allotment for that is $3.1 million. but it costs $1.3 million more than what we actually received from the state to run those courts. Those judges expect their bailiffs to be there. The system jams up if we don't have these things. This is a burden, an additional burden on the county. I mentioned realignment. When realignment occurred and that was pushed down to the local governments, we spent $40 million in infrastructure costs to change our jails from jails that were designed to house a person essentially 365 days or through their court process, not for 5, 10, or 15 years, that somebody's now remaining in custody in a county jail environment. The state has always had, we call them SB 90 claims or Senate Bill 90 claims. And it's basically claims we can make when the state has changed a process or a policy. Those mandates you were referring to when you were talking to Jesse earlier. We've submitted over $12 million in those claims. Recently, we had one of those claims sent back that was submitted over 19 years ago and asking for more documentation from 19 years ago. And as you can imagine, that's unreasonable. So immediately $6 million of that 12 was wiped out by the state just because they can. And it doesn't seem like it's a correct process at all. You've seen cannabis in this county go through the roof. It used to be, we had a similar problem with methamphetamine. It was very difficult. It was all through our deserts being mass produced and a number of those things. At that period of time, you could count on the state of California to help you with the Bureau of Narcotics Enforcement. They were out there taking down these labs just like all of us in local law enforcement were. Cannabis control, 5, 7 folks across the entire state. And those folks do the best they can. And it's a Herculean effort on their part, but it's nothing like it used to be where they're actually sending teams of people out to help us with this. That's $1 billion in terms of illicit cannabis we pulled out this year with very little help from the state. Even though the folks that they do have at the Bureau of Cannabis Control are trying the best they can to help us, but there's a number of those differences. You're also seeing it in mental health and realignment with the Department of State hospitals and the costs that go around there. And we can talk in more detail about really what that looked like and how some of those things were supposed to spin out in terms of partnership. But instead, it's push them down. Hey, you handle it. Oh, and here's a check. But the checks that are written don't always cover the costs. And especially right now, recruitment for everybody and the manpower that goes along with it is next to nil. The true partnership doesn't exist. And it's my hope that we can reach across the aisle of politics, no matter what color you represent, and solve problems for the human condition.
Perfect. Yes, absolutely. I completely agree. So, Mr. Armendariz, given your background in real estate and residential real estate, and listening to Sheriff Dicus and his challenges with, budgets being applied to offering, proper law enforcement channels and, basically people, within the communities, can you please speak a little bit about what you have seen in terms of peripherally in the communities, how this has impacted, the communities, maybe not having the proper funding necessary, and does that have an effect on property values?
It has a direct effect. At the end of the day, people want to feel safe, and that's speaking from as a policymaker and as a realtor. The biggest things that people care about is their safety and the education. Those are the two factors that are always going to come in play when anyone's deciding where they want to live. When you have all these laws that have been put on the books that are allowing people to be, to roam freely with our homeless, with realignment, with our jails, all these other issues that have happened, that we have more criminals on the street today, there's a lot of places that just don't feel safe anymore. I don't know if you've been in a Home Depot and watched people literally grab buckets of tools and walk right out and no one does anything about it. Because they can't. People see that, they don't want to be in that area. They don't want to be in that community. First thing they go, oh, we don't want to be here, whatever city it is. And I'm going to do my best not to bring up actual city names because, I think everyone struggles. And I believe all of our electeds do the best they can with the resources they have. But there are cities in our region that suffer more than others because whether it's the homeless gravitating to that community or whether it's the crime that's happening in that city they don't have enough manpower or budgetary, they just can't afford to combat it. they suffer, and the people in those communities suffer because, at the end of the day, the values start to come down. Um, People don't, it's not as desirable for a for sale house, so it becomes a rental, and people who can barely afford to make rent are moving into those locations, and they're being, you know, having to deal with the issues that happen, in struggling communities. So, at the end of the day, it's this uh, almost constant roll downhill that continues to build upon itself and becomes a time where once we've lost control over it, how do we get it back? And it takes things like sweeps and having our public safety officers be able to go in there and just really get control over it. But with that also comes, you need the money to be able to do that. That stuff's not
Right.
that's free either. Um, so there are communities that suffer greatly because of the lack of public safety in that community. There are education-wise areas that are low income, families with two parents working two jobs. Kids aren't safe. There are no back to after school programs available, things like that, where those kids suffer too. And it's just a big repetitive cycle, and the desirability of real estate in those areas tends to go down. Rentals become more. You don't ever want to be a for rent city. I can tell you that's not a good sign for a community. If you're a city of beds where people want to live there and it's desirable, uh, you tend to get better school grades because people are living there who can afford to buy a house, so they're buying a house, they're investing in the community. Their kids, they have good jobs where they're able to take time and work with their children to give them a better education. it, you know so you have the haves and you have the have-nots, and in real estate you can see just by looking at numbers the areas that have the haves, the ones that have the have-nots.
Right. And so that basically boils down to funding. And the dynamic that I'm hearing right now sounds very much like a downward spiral, right? Because when we have existing public policy that downgrades certain crimes, such as, walking out of Home Depot with $900 or $899 worth of merchandise without any, really any repercussions. And also, other uh, court and public safety demands that are being pressed upon our communities without the proper funding to support these efforts that are not necessarily stemming from our own communities, but being, from my understanding, maybe migrated from surrounding communities or surrounding counties to San Bernardino County. It sounds like a very, very a daunting challenge to keep up with it financially. So it makes sense that this measure EE is now on the ballot and will allow residents to really take stock of what's happening in their communities and understand the value of funding. When we come back from the break, we're going to talk about the state of California's surplus, because our state has a tremendous surplus, and we'll talk about how we can look at distributing those funds in the future. So let's go to break. For those listening, I'm Yvette Walker on Southern California Business Report on ABC News and Talks, KMET 1490 AM, 98.1 FM, and KMET TV, here with Sheriff Shannon Dicus of San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department and Jesse Armendariz, top 250 Hispanic realtor and former Fontana, California council member, talking about and analyzing the economic dynamics, impact, and opportunities in the Fair Share Initiative that is on the ballot as Measure EE for residents of San Bernardino County when we return.
Every 2 seconds, someone needs a blood transfusion. Be on the giving side. Livestream Blood Bank supports patients in 80 Southern California hospitals. Call 1-800-TRY-GIVING for more information and to set an appointment.
City of Hope is driven to making a difference in the lives of people with cancer and diabetes. We accomplish this by conducting innovative research and providing outstanding care. If you or a loved one has received a cancer diagnosis, go to cityofhope.org to learn more about how our innovative approach could change your outcome.
Cal State San Bernardino is home to the only school of entrepreneurship in California. With globally ranked degree programs, you can start your journey today to become a successful entrepreneur. Learn more and connect at entre.csusb.edu.
Ontario International Airport is on to a better way to fly with over 65 daily nonstop flights to more than 20 major destinations and the easiest airport experience in Southern California. Visit flyonto.com/Ontario to learn more about Ontario International Airport today.
Hi, I'm San Bernardino County Sheriff Shannon Dicus. If you're looking to start an exciting career in law enforcement and make a difference in your community, we are hiring dispatchers, nurses, deputies, laterals, and many more. For a complete list of our jobs and more information, visit sheriffsjobs.com.
The University of La Verne is rated first in California for alumni satisfaction. Learn more about accelerated programs offered online and on campus in La Verne, Irvine, Ontario, Burbank, or College of the Canyons. Visit go.laverne.edu. The University of La Verne. go.laverne.edu.
It's summer, the sun is shining, and now's the time to make the most of your solar panels. Don't lose up to 50% of your solar panels' efficiency just because they're dirty. Get the most out of your solar panels and call my friends at Solar Panel Cleaning Specialists at 951-663-7502. That's 951-663-7502. Mention this ad and receive your discount. Offer expires December 31st. Welcome back. For those listening, I'm Yvette Walker on Southern California Business Report on ABC News and Talks, KMET 1490 AM, 98.1 FM, and KMET TV. Here with Sheriff Shannon Dicus of San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department and Jesse Armend, top 250 Hispanic realtor and former Fontana, California council member, talking about and analyzing the economic dynamics, impact, and opportunities in the Fair Share Initiative that is on the ballot as Measure E for residents of San Bernardino County. Thank you again for being with us today, Sheriff Dicus and Mr. Armend.
Thank you, Yvette.
All right, so prior to the break, we discussed generally what Measure EE is, and we spoke about some of the challenges that our communities are experiencing for lack of funding. Sheriff Dicus, I'd like to ask you: do we have an idea, an estimate of what those deficits actually look like in terms of funding that we're not receiving from the state that we should be receiving? And also, please talk about the surplus that we have at the state and how that plays into the dynamic of distribution of funds moving forward. Sure.
Well, Yvette, there's a number of things I can put numbers to. And I mentioned SB 90 claims. So since 1999, we've had $12 million worth of claims. I explained how $6 million got dismissed based on timing. We're still owed $4.5 million. And we've only received about $350,000 of that money in terms of the county. That's just with SB 90 claims. As we continue to roll forward and talk about other things, trial court security funding. Again, I know there's a deficit from last fiscal year of $1.3 million. And because counties and employees are constantly in negotiations in terms of their contracts and pay, the state's process doesn't keep up with that. So next year, we're anticipating it'll be $5.4 million in terms of the deficit as it relates to the trial court security funding. Think of what we could do for the communities. Jesse mentioned earlier being able to fund sweeps and these things. There are a lot of bad actors that are in our community now that are committing crime that we can go after and put them in jail and hang on to these people. Difficult to do in the times we have, particularly with the number of laws that are being signed in. And I'm seeing what I believe is a complete shift from supporting law enforcement to supporting the person who's committing the crimes. And I hardly ever hear about victims being talked about. So we can actually put a number to those funds. Who's going to pay the Board of Supervisors back for the $2 million they invested to have an extra cannabis team go out and deal with illegal cannabis in our county? Again, state functions, having very small state staffs that used to assist us with these types of things, and they just don't exist today. And what I tell everybody, we're talking about mental health investments, prison investments. What does a partnership look like? And I'm going to go to your point. You always say, okay, Shannon, tell me what's wrong, but what are the solutions? So instead of not building prisons anymore, why didn't we build reentry facilities in the counties that have a high parole population? I can tell you our local probation department takes on the brunt of that. And they do an excellent job, but it becomes a monumental task when we keep pushing these things down to them. We all heard about zero bail initiatives not too long ago. Didn't work out completely. So how did the state legislature get through and still kind of manage to do the same thing? They created Senate Bill 129. And Senate Bill 129 is just like SB 10 with language that says the DA and the sheriff can't be involved in the release process of pretrial inmates. And they're asking probation to do that again. Another task that probation is being asked to do in terms of all of the other things they asked to do. And I can promise you the check that comes down to the courts and probation is not enough to do it in the manner they'd like to do it, where people are actually supervised and do the things that really the meaning of the legislature wanted these things done in the first place. And that's another example where the county is going to have to come to the table, fill in that gap so that probation is able to do a Herculean task in a manner that they want to do it for the community. And I can go on and on again. Mental health, where are the investments from the state? Drive down to Patton State Hospital that's out here in Highland. Just ask yourself while you're standing there looking at the facility, where's the state investment? Still looks like the 1950s construction technology, even though I know there are people inside doing amazing work, but we're not investing in state-run facilities so that the mental health programs we're seeing on the street actually exist. They're asking counties to do that and build this capacity. And everybody gets tired of hearing government say capacity. But the reality is the cart is so far in front of the horse in terms of the assembly putting these laws through and laws getting signed with no capacity on the back end. Again, well-meaning people, and some of these things could work, but without that capacity, without the mental health facility for the court to say that this person needs that help and they need to stay here for 120-day rehab, for whatever it takes to bring them to a cognitive level to participate in society, let's be honest with ourselves. They don't exist, and counties are struggling and cities are struggling to try to put these things into play. And that is what's delivered to our board members, to our mayors and councils, is that, hey, here's a problem. The law's changed. You handle it. It's not a partnership, and it should be a partnership.
Right. No, I completely get it. Mr. Armendariz, please talk about it from a local municipality level. My experience on the Community Development Block Grant Committee gave me some insight as to, the funding and how it's distributed and how that comes from the state. What have you seen during your time as a council member? And please expand on what that is and how that really helps to bolster, the infrastructure and needs of the communities in the areas that those CDBG funds are meant to support.
So, if we're I'm going to talk about funding overall because CDBG funds have restrictions on them that the intention's well, but with all the restrictions, it's harder to get a lot of things accomplished. So you end up having to dip into your general funds if you really want to make some real change in a community. The biggest issues I struggled with as a council member was, having the political will to want to do something and not having the financial ability. When you go back and you say, okay, well, here's how we believe we should be handling this. I'll use homelessness as the example in a community. Those people have their way of dealing with it, but then you also have the county who actually controls those funds. So you're, from a city council perspective, you almost felt like your hands were tied because you had to use your funds that, even though you knew the county had funds that were able to be utilized for that, you were using your funds to do the work you wanted to do in hopes that you would get some sort of reimbursement back from the county, state, from the higher municipalities. That's why I think it's important that you have, policymakers who are going to look at cities and say, if you have a plan that's working, let me be your partner. I think it starts at the bottom. You have to show good partnership between your city and your county. Then you can use that as the example to say from the county to the state, look, here's what we've accomplished. We're doing much more today because we're working together. And I'm not, the state's not telling me how to do it. The county's not telling the city how to do it, and you're seeing good policies come out of that, because no one knows a community better than I like to believe, than the people who are creating the policy in that specific city. So there's huge detriments when you're talking about unfunded mandates, when you're required to do one thing but you have no money. RENA numbers is a great example. That you had to fight with housing. Right now you're hearing we need more housing units, more housing units. The state's requiring it for funding, but what people don't realize is municipalities do not build houses. That's not their job. Their job is to create policy that will push for development. But they're also being held to an accountability level today that they're basically saying, if you don't meet these numbers, we're going to start pulling funds. And I'm not saying every municipality, in California is playing by the same rules, because there are some municipalities who choose not to want to have the numbers. But it always bugs me when you have someone who is in Sacramento making decisions for the local, for the people in the community who, I'm held when I'm a policymaker at the local level, I'm held to the people in my community. And even when my hands are tied, I'm still held to the people in my community, regardless, if I'm pushing a higher density in my community because I have to get funding. There are those who will say, well, then reject funding. Well, we have police officers we have to pay, we have fire guys we have to pay, we have to repair streets, we have to make sure street lights are working. We have to provide some sort of, way to care for our mentally, ill, homeless people or drug addicted, so you're got to, create parks and have community centers where it's vibrant, and all this stuff costs money. But when you have mandates that are passed from the state to the local, and you're having to figure out, how do I pay for these things? It's very, very daunting to figure out what is the right decision. And I just at the end of the day, the pressure that you have to deal with, I think that's why Measure EE is so important, because you're going to be able to show Sacramento, here's what we've been given, and here's where we're falling short. Where a county 60 miles away is receiving more than ample funding for the exact same thing, and you're saying, well, they're receiving that funding, but all their people are coming to my area. So it's going to be, I think, an opportunity for us to say, here's where the shortcomings are coming, and here's what's actually really happening, and being able to put that on paper. And it's going to take the measure to be approved for us to be able to do that, because the money that's going to have to be spent to do these studies is something that you don't want to just do half-heartedly. You're going to want to do it the right way, and you want to make sure that the people in San Bernardino County are supporting you in spending that money, because it's their money, not ours, as elected officials.
Right. And so that to me is a steward of a proper steward of tax dollars, gathered from residents of San Bernardino County, especially when we're talking about mandated liabilities. Sheriff Dicus, please talk to us about the landscape moving forward, and how you see some of these maybe mandates piling on. Recently, Governor Newsom did, a very good thing in signing a bill to start care court. And so it's a great format. And I know that your department has worked and developed programs that are similar to that, and aimed at reducing recidivism. Please talk about what you're seeing coming down the pipeline in terms of additional mandates on top of the mandates that the county already has, that already is in a deficit, and kind of analyze that trajectory, and for our audience to kind of understand in real terms what could potentially happen should this effort not move forward.
Yvette, I'm so glad you asked this question. So let's talk about care court. And I am in lockstep with the governor. He realizes that folks can't see the forest through the trees, and we need to really take a hold of these folks, and for the human condition, get them to places that can help them. So I'm in agreement with the governor on that wholeheartedly. But let's talk about how care court affects a county real quick. So number one, the law will be passed to say that this exists. We'll go out and we will do these gravely disabled cases in partnership with our friends from the Department of Behavioral Health, Public Health, and County Hospital. We'll take them before a judge and they'll say, okay, person A, you have these problems. Department of Behavioral Health, you have these things. And for the really serious folks that need that level of commitment or a conservatorship, the reality is the capacity doesn't exist. So again, we have the cart before the horse in terms of the law being there, but not the facilities to really help these folks. And when you see how a lot of money is put out to the counties, it really is kind of a small experiment in efficiencies. So a lot of it comes out in terms of grants. And we have a lot of great faith-based and community-based groups that say, hey, Sheriff, if you partner with this group, you can get these millions of dollars and do this. Well, what the problem it poses for government as a whole is what happens when they don't perform to that level or affect recidivism, affect homelessness, affect mental health. It's a 3-year grant period before we can turn around and now switch to somebody else that may have a better idea. It's really not efficient, but it binds those things together. And there are groups that are getting money for these things. So, and the other thing is, I don't think we do a lot of these faith-based and community-based groups a good service, because if you look at point in time counts, in this county, you split them in half. So Care Court will address major psychotic issues and schizophrenia, but it completely ignores substance abuse disorder. Mm-hmm. So now we've got to create those tools, create the capacity on that end of things, and there are comorbidities that they affect both. And you know, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to see these, because again, we see it in the streets daily. So again, these capacities aren't there, even though the laws that are changing, and we need those laws to be able to make these things happen. But the consequences to the county are, hey, implement, but do it without any funding or anything else to go along with it. What does that picture look like?
Right.
And you got to remember, even if the money came tomorrow, just like to Jesse's point, we don't build buildings. We create policy. So now it's finding somebody to build the buildings. And what are we going to be 4 years into this? And is the human condition getting better by the time it comes around? I would say not.
Right. And so based on those timelines, Sheriff, when do you see, you know, from the time that potentially this measure should pass to the initiation of this, you know, this study to, you know, analyze what the numbers actually are through Sacramento? What do you see, you know, the lifespan of this measure looking like as we move forward?
So kind of to Jesse's point, you know, really collating all the data and figuring out where these gaps exist, really a gap analysis, if you will. But I know our board and I know our county, all of the department heads and everybody in this county works together collaboratively. We're going to take a proactive approach. We're going to start building that capacity, even though we're going to be able to approve what we're not getting. And those things are going to kind of commingle. So how long it takes us to do that study, I don't know, but we're going to start solving these problems to the best of our ability. And I hope the two catch up with each other. I really hope that this measure at the end of the day is, like I said earlier, the exclamation mark that brings us all to the table. So we talk and we get these things taken care of. I know we have amazing senators and amazing assembly members that represent San Bernardino County, and getting them to really start working on these things, because they've been brought forth, and there's only a few that are keeping their heads in the sand, and we'll bring them into the fold as well, again, collaboratively, and try to get us all to work together to solve this. It's my hope that we'll start on a timeline. Care Court's going to come out here in about 2 years to San Bernardino County. I know we're working on our homeless strategic plan. We just adopted one. So you're going to see us take some proactive measures, even without the state, because we have to for the benefit of the citizens in the county.
Right. And the proactive measures that you are already taking are absolutely phenomenal. I'm curious, Sheriff, are there any detrimental aspects of not being able to provide, let's say, for instance, these Care Core resources to the community? Are there any, you know, mandates or any penalties for not being able to provide the support or services through this bill, even though, you know, technically the county may not be receiving funding for it? That's a question I have.
Well, the first and foremost, obviously, the human cost of this. People are rotting in their own skin right now. Yes. Substance abuse is no longer a crime. And I'm not one of those sheriffs that say everybody needs to be in jail that's a substance abuser. but we don't have the capacity to treat them. Before, we had drug court and a number of these things. So the human condition is going to continue to decline until we can get out in front of some of these things and certainly build these capacities. So that's the biggest issue that I see there in terms of, deadlines. The deadline was yesterday. And we just aren't doing a good job in that manner to be able to go out. We got to break out of our 9-to-5 existence. These are 24-hour issues, and we've got to reach out and help people. The public, the hardworking public, the tax-paying public is expecting us to take care of those things. What did I mention at the beginning? We don't want them looking over their shoulder. Right. Because of homelessness, because of mental health issues, they're looking over their shoulder. We've got to start addressing these things now, or that everything that Jesse told us as it relates to the housing market is going to be negatively affected. In the Inland Empire, this is the place to live. This is affordable housing, and people can commute to other areas in terms of jobs. We've got to make all of the resources here in San Bernardino County, take that family unit, wrap ourselves around them, and make sure they're living healthy, and that really from cradle to career, that county vision is alive and well.
Perfect. So, Jesse, please share with us, what you're hoping will come of this measure as we move forward and voters have the opportunity to examine what it's about, the impact that it will have on their everyday life moving forward, because funding is necessary to enact these changes and to provide the resources. Please talk about what that looks like to you.
So, at the end of the day, with Measure E, it's all about accountability. It's all about accountability and transparency. But Sheriff Dicus hit so many great points. When you're really taking all this apart, the care court issue is one of the things that's personally close to my heart, also, and I support it 100%. It's where do you find the funds to enact it, and that's really what all these conversations are all about, right? At the end of the day, we're searching for funds. We're searching for the availability of funds. How do we help people help themselves? I personally have a family member who struggles with mental illness, and to see the ability of our hands being tied as family to be able to do anything to help them when they can't help themselves, to me, care court is one of those things that could actually help. Thank God he's finally gotten the help he needs and he's on the right track today, but that doesn't mean he won't have an episode tomorrow. And, I think that a lot of these things, that I've been able to see in the last 2 years have educated me to a point where I see some pitfalls that we have that we could shore up. But at the end of the day, it all comes back to funding. There's a million things everyone wants to do. And the best way I could, if I had to approach it to someone and say, this is why we want to support this measure, is it's all about funding. It's all about how do we get our fair share? How do we get the funding? And the way we're going to do that is by showing Sacramento that we're not. It's by showing Sacramento, here's where we haven't got it, and let's work collaboratively. Let's figure out a way that we can all come together, bring those resources together so we can make a better community for all. And that, for me, that's where my heart is on this whole thing, is making sure that we advocate, that we're going to advocate for the transparency and the accountability on both sides, because we're going to see where we're spending money. We're also going to see where we're not getting the money that we needed to, so that we could, be funded and do a good job for the people who rely on us. Sheriff Dicus has, a tremendous respect for me, because he's there. He's actively going, even though he hasn't figured out the money yet. He's like, we're gonna do this. We're gonna do it one way or another. We're gonna figure it out. Whether we have those, the funding today, we're gonna figure out how we're gonna get there, and we're gonna work together with everybody. I think that's the approach we need to have. I think we need to, if we're gonna make this work and Measure E to be a success, it's gonna take all of us sitting at the table, having those meaningful conversations on where we're at, how we got here, and how do we change it so that we can be in a better position tomorrow.
Perfect. So, Sheriff Dicus, please share with our listeners and our viewers, some thoughts on how we can support not only you and your department on a law enforcement level, and on a human level as well, for those that are, as you say, they are rotting in their own skin when they're sitting in the street, with their mental health issues and their addiction issues. How can the community rally and gather to support you, in addition to voting to support this measure? What are other ways that the community can support your efforts moving forward?
Well, Yvette, you and Jesse mentioned a couple of them. He talked about Home Depot, and we were alluding to Prop 47. Let's take a look at that. If we're going to implement something like Prop 47, let's have the capacity first and then implement it. Can we put something on suspense and now build this capacity that's missing? And if people get tired, I know I hear it from some of our folks that I talk to on a regular basis. Oh, you always talk about capacity. Well, the reality is, without it, we can't affect the human condition. Law enforcement will be there for all of our community to do those things that are lawful, but awful in terms of humanity and the violence that we're seeing today. But can we do some preventative measures before law enforcement has to go to that level? And that really is getting out there. How do we take care of a person that's experiencing homelessness, that has all these comorbidity type issues related to mental health and substance abuse? And Yvette, if a person really wants to help themselves in the current environment, we can do that. We can get them the resources they need. The people we need to address are the ones that can't see their own condition degrading, that we've got to take control of their lives, bring them to a level where they're active participants in their life, and we can get them to a point where they can be productive members of society and really contribute to this thing. And the last thing, if I could ask of anything from the members of the public, not just this issue, as you said, pay attention to what we vote for and be an active voter. Make sure we're reading the fine print. That would help.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise and your thoughts on Measure EE as it, affects law enforcement, San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department, and the community on, the ground floor as well. Thank you so much, Sheriff Dicus, and thank you, Mr. Armend for being with us today.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. So for everyone listening, don't miss my interview with Mayor Aquanetta Warren of Fontana, California, and San Bernardino County District Attorney Jason Anderson. Aquanetta Warren was elected as mayor in December of 2010 and is now serving her third term as mayor of the city of Fontana, California. Mayor Warren focuses her administrations on bolstering economic development, creating educational opportunities, and advocating for a healthier community. During her 8 years as a councilwoman and now third term as mayor, Warren has spearheaded significant economic growth and has played a critical role in positioning Fontana as a supply chain hub that provides critical goods throughout the world. San Bernardino County District Attorney Jason Anderson has been a member of the State of California Bar since 1997. He graduated from Regent University School of Law in Virginia in 1996. Mr. Anderson served as Deputy District Attorney for the County of San Bernardino from 1998 until 2014. In this capacity, he worked as a prosecutor, handling a variety of serious cases, particularly in the Crimes Against Children Unit for 13 years. Mr. Anderson has been married for 26 years and has 2 children. Next week, we will have Cherie Gillens. She is the Marketing and Communications Director at the Inland Empire Community Foundation, which is the oldest and largest community foundation serving Riverside and San Bernardino counties. Working primarily from the Riverside office, Cherie oversees all activities related to marketing, communications, and public relations for the foundation and is a member of the senior leadership team. Cherie has served as a communications professional with a career spanning 20 years. Most recently as the Associate State Director of Communications in the California office of AARP for 14 years. Prior to AARP, Cherie worked in the Marketing and Communications Department for United Way of Greater Los Angeles. Throughout her career at AARP and United Way, Cherie has designed and implemented communications and marketing programs and advocacy campaigns and signature events that inform and engage key audiences. She is also a graduate of California State Polytechnic University of Pomona, and together with her husband, Anthony, she has 3 sons, aged 23, 22, and 18. In her spare time, Cherie enjoys supporting youth sports and traveling. So don't miss it, everybody. We will see you next week.